One, the Leper Repression Act is passed, and globally, islands are turned into leper colonies, thinking that if every single leper dies out within a leper colony, the cure to leprosy would be found. And that explains the graveyard to your right hand side. They would have separated male from female lepers because fearing that children born from a parent that has leprosy could mean the disease would continue. So there's a male and a female colony. But leprosy became treatable. It was no longer as contagious as it was perceived, and throughout the world, leper colonies closed down. And we're in the 1920s now, and once lepers was taken off, they burned down, they demolished every single building used by a leper, with exception to a church we will see a little bit later. But you know, as odd as you and I might find the fears of the unknowns where the medical history is concerned, let us not forget 2 years ago, COVID-19. And there's a recommendation made in Parliament that to contain COVID, turn Robben Island into a COVID hospital, send all COVID patients over here. That was just 2 years ago. Now, you from, if I may ask, you from? Nigeria. You know, if you don't mind having a quick conversation with you. But okay, I've got Nigeria, US, India. Don't be shy. Shout out. Italy. Sweden at the back. Finland. Bangladesh. And then I've got some more South Africans as well. Am I right? Which part of South Africa, if I may ask? Durban. Sorry, Durban. The lady said, you said from Durban, eh? I always thought KZN stood for KwaZulu-Natal. I believe it doesn't. I believe it stands for Kingdom Brazilians of Naidus. I think that's correct, eh? I think it should be called Kingdom Brazilians of Naidus. But you know why I ask is there are so much from the history that we as South Africans were taught that we don't know. There's so much of our own history that we don't know. For an example, South Africa had 4 racial classifications: white, colored, Indian, and black. And the perception we as South Africans had, and probably still have, please South Africans, tell me if I'm wrong, but if the mother of the child was white and the father of the child was white, the perception is the child is white. Am I correct? Indian mother, Indian father, Indian child. Colored child, colored father, colored mother, colored child. That would be the perception. But the unknowns is that you were not racially classified by the apartheid system based on mom or dad, but at the age of 16. It was at the age of 16 that they racially classified you into one of 4. That is when you applied for your identification document. But you see, sir, you're always going to get that one guy that's too dark to be me, and I'd have been colored, but also too light to be you. You know what I mean? That Trevor Noah guy. So what happens? They test you. They put a pencil into your hair. So if you shake your head and that pencil falls out, you are colored. If it gets stuck, you're black. But I came to you, sir, from Nigeria because you have no hair. Not now. It was a measurement of the thickness of the upper lip or the width of the nostril. The thicker the upper lip, the wider the nostril, the black you are. What I'm trying to share, and there's some South Africans sitting at the back that will probably tell you, oh, I've never heard that before. That is just some of the unknowns of our own history. But classified black, they called you a Bantu. And you were governed by a law called the pass law. And how the law worked, it told you where to stay, work, areas you were allowed to enter, what parts of your own town you were allowed to enter. So you actually walked around with your identification document, because all of this would be stipulated within this document. It was like walking around in your own country of birth with a passport. Contravening the document was contravening the law. Whether you forgot the document at home, whether you were caught on the wrong side of the road, the police had the authority to arrest and sentence to jail. So you could end up in prison, anything between 3 to 6 months without the trial. Like the one lady told us how she ended up in prison for 3 months for not being able to produce the document when requested by a police officer. And she said, the problem was, I was on my way to a police station to report that I was just robbed of my bag. And when I got close, they were stopped and I couldn't produce the document. It was in my bag that was just stolen. And I was still in prison for 3 months for not being able to produce this document. Because the police became judge, jury, and executioner. 1959, a new political movement is formed, the Pan-Africanist Congress. And the co-founding member of this movement was a man by the name of Robert Sobukwe. He gives up his profession as a professor in African languages, calls on every single black South African in possession of the pass law to deliberately leave the document at home, go to the nearest police station demanding arrest. So the thinking was, will the country have enough prison space to house everyone if they all contravene on one day and at the same time? And this is what the masses did on the 21st of March 1960. And in front of one police station, the police shot and killed 69 people. And the world got to know this as the day of the Sharpeville massacre. Robert Sobukwe was arrested, charged with incitement, found guilty by a court of law, and sentenced to 3 years, which he served out in Johannesburg. But we're going to jump to 1963. Robert Sobukwe was due for release. The fight for freedom had UMESA. Is that your iPhone?
It's hers.
I just saw a snake.
Oh, there's a snake.
Okay.
It was a little baby mole snake. Tiny toy. No. You must say, that's a nice money saver for me, because you just say that they saved him from buying. Is that an iPhone 14? No, it would have been an iPhone 14 you'd have gotten. It's kind of cheaper in South Africa though, if you're interested. But Robert Sobukwe, 1963, is about to be released. At the time when the fight for freedom was escalating, when the apartheid government was trying to suppress this uprising, they were banning political movements. Robben Island had become the jail we know it today, and the leader of the most powerful movement was about to be released. And the entire parliament sits down, discusses one man, and passes what was known as the Sobukwe Clause, allowing the state to rearrest Robert Sobukwe, place him under house arrest. They could confine him to a space where no one is allowed to talk to him and is allowed to talk to no one. And they brought him to that house with the water tank attached to it. They would now confine him to an area which is somewhat fenced in today. And they told him, isolation, no one to talk to besides yourself, for 1 year. Robert Sobukwe, now I think I might confuse some of you now, but Robert Sobukwe is also now regarded as the only political prisoner in South Africa. And because he was the only political prisoner in South Africa, he was allowed to get up, go to bed when he wanted to, wear his own clothes, he was allowed books, newspapers, a radio to listen to, he could walk around freely, but no one to talk to besides himself. And 1 year became 2 years. 2 years became 3 years. And finally, after 6 years of isolation, no one to talk to besides himself, he's diagnosed with lung cancer. And fearing that the only political prisoner in South Africa could die here, They moved him and took him to a township 12 hours north of Cape Town away by car called Khalishiwe, where a house was given to him. His wife, his kids were moved. They were now going to stay with him in one house. He was allowed to interact with the people of that town, but they told him, you talk to 3 people or more at the same time will constitute an illegal gathering. That is also odd to think. He had a wife and 4 kids. He died in 1978 at the age of 54, still in the house arrest. So to quickly recap, the only political prisoner in the country, a law had been passed by Parliament to govern him, the leader of the most powerful movement at one stage, and we have never heard that name before. It rings a bell to some people, and this is where he was kept. He had become the forgotten name, forgotten hero of this country. And I know there's 1 or 2 South Africans over here that probably never heard that name before. Again, the unknowns of our history. A lot of people will know the name. You're from where? The young lady over there?
Gauteng.
Gauteng. Go to Wits University?
No.
Because at Wits University there's a building named after him. And that's how a lot of Joburgers got to know the name Robert Sobukwe. Like in Cape Town, we Cape Townians know Robert Sobukwe because there's a road named after him. Kind of full stop. But the real history around it is forgotten. And that is why I apologize if you find I took him on a very long road to get here. But I hope I was able to put some sort of context to this man and how he ended up on Robben Island. But yeah, this is where he spent 6 years of his life. The grid and gate structure to the right. Please note there were never prisoners kept there. With Rottweilers, German Shepherd police type dogs being introduced, kennels was needed to house these dogs. So I don't know if Castro talked about dogs being used in the jail complex. The dogs were introduced in the mid-1970s, long after he was taken off. But yeah, 6 years, no one to talk to besides yourself. I think mentally and vocally, you and I can only imagine. But yeah, that was a baby mole snake. I don't know if you guys saw how quickly it moved. It almost sort of jumped over certain things. So yeah, like I said, you never know what we're going to see as we go along. There's another thing about what I also share. You'll find is that I don't necessarily talk or point out every single structure or site. Please note, whatever I don't share or point out or talk about, those structures or sites links to the Second World War history. But I will talk about the Second World War sometime during our time together. I take you into the Second World War history. Just a disclaimer for all of you, I take no responsibility for anyone throwing phones through the window. I will just pick it up and keep it for me. But this is another space where I take a bit of time. Do you mind if I use my voice? Hope you don't mind. Is the voice loud enough, Sweden?
Yeah.
By the way, Sweden, did you know that in 1963, the apartheid government actually offered Robert Sobukwe a one-way ticket to Sweden? And they actually approached the Swedish government, saying to the Swedish government, here is this guy, we're prepared to give him a one-way ticket to your country. Are you guys okay to accept him? If he says yes. And the Swedish government said no. By sending one man out of your country will not solve the problems you have. You need to abolish your apartheid laws. And that was a stance the Swedish government did. Now, I don't know, you guys are from Texas, US. Does the name Andrew Young ring a bell? He was the mayor of Atlanta at one stage. At one stage, he was some high member of parliament. But Andrew Young, in the 70s, indirectly paid for the studies of the children of Robert Sobukwe, his 4 kids. to a point that he even moved them after his death, moved him to Atlanta, where he paid to look after them over there. And out of the 4, 2 has passed away, and the other 2 still lives out in the US. I think they are now residents of the US. I know his eldest son, Dini, lived on Robben Island for a while, and he passed away not long ago, along with his brother also passed away in the recent time. But just the role the international community played. It's like the role the international community played to ultimately cripple the economy of our country through sanctions. But I'm going to get to that in a moment. Where we are right now is one of the hard labor quarries. Now, it's interesting to note 2 things. 1, Robben Island was a jail for males of color, and 2, Robben Island was a jail not for political prisoners but for criminals. Because according to the law of the country, everyone kept in that jail was sentenced by a court of law for breaking the law of the country. So they were trialed as criminals and they were sentenced to this jail as criminals. And please, I'm strictly talking according to the law of the country. And I hope it will make sense to you when I conclude. They kept all the masterminds in one section of the prison, and everyone else kept in communal cells. Those guys kept in those communal cells, did hard labor of building that jail you were in. They built the building with the arch, the visitor center. They built the roads. But because they never wanted the leaders to influence the other prisoners, the leaders worked here. And what they did, they excavated limestone only. The other prisoners used the limestone to build the roads. Mindless work, by the way. How many roads do you need? And they excavated for 13 years. But when the economy of our country was being crippled, the apartheid government wanted to negotiate. But the political movement said, release all political activists unconditionally, and then we will talk. And reluctantly, they agreed. And by 1989, you saw the start of the political activists from jails. By the 14th of October 1989, the first group of prisoners was released. And almost every other day, you saw guys being released because the agreement was that by the end of April 1991, there'll be no more political activists within our country. And on the 27th of April 1991, the last group of political activists was taken from Robben Island. 3rd December that same year, they started the negotiations that led to our elections, and Nelson Mandela became president. And apartheid, by the way, South Africans, came to an end with a brand new constitution that was adopted. A constitution still regarded as the most progressive in the world. And the apartheid government says these guys came out of prison far more prepared for the negotiations than what we thought they would be. And I thought, how odd. You throw all political activists into one jail. You throw cultures, languages, religions, different political movements into one space. You keep the masterminds together, and you're surprised that they're ready to talk. What did you think they were talking about? And that is why when I bring you to this hard labor quarry, I don't see a cave, it was a toilet. I don't see the hard labor with a shovel or pickaxe. I see how they, the prisoners, change the narrative of this prison. A narrative of breaking their spirit, a narrative of making them suffer, to a narrative of critical debates and lifelong learning. The most progressive constitution in the world. It's like saying to you, welcome to the first democratic parliament of our country, and not Robben Island, the prison. But freedom was a dream that they as prisoners had. They talked about it, they planned for. And for so many of them, freedom was a dream that was never going to happen in their lifetime. In 1995, there's a reunion. And 1,200 former prisoners returned to Robben Island, stood in this quarry. And that day, they were members of parliament, leaders in civil society. That day, Nelson Mandela stood here as president of South Africa, living that dream they had as prisoners. And as they concluded this reunion, as they walked out, you know, Mr. Mandela had picked up a stone, walked to the entrance, stood for a moment, and he laid the stone down, and all the others followed. And that is how that pile of stones, that heap of stones was formed, which day is a monument of the triumph of the human spirit of adversity, the triumph of the human spirit of all odds. Remember I asked nationalities and where people are from? It speaks about what that pile of stones is all about. Of different cultures, languages, political minds sitting in one space once again. The triumph of the human spirit. I don't like going into the prison that I was never in. But I hope I was able to share a bit of value to what my colleague had shared with you as he took you through that jail. But I don't know if there are any questions. I see we got clever, you're taking photographs